First day at a new job, new table, new faces you have never seen before. You say less than everyone else because that is just how you naturally are. 10 minutes in, somebody makes a joke about you. Nothing brutal, just enough to land. And here is the part that matters. They watch you when they say it. Just a flicker, half a second, checking how you take it. You have felt that moment before. Everybody has. That tiny pause where the whole table seems to lean in slightly, waiting to see what you do with it. Most people think that moment is random, a joke, forgotten by lunch. It is not random at all. That moment is the entire room deciding something about you, whether anyone in it realizes it or not. Every group of people runs this same test. Family dinners, new jobs, friend circles that have known each other for years and still do it to anyone new who walks in. And it almost always runs the test on the quiet one first. Not because the quiet one looks weak, because the quiet one is the only person in the room nobody has figured out yet. Everybody else already told the room who they are, just by talking. The quiet one told the room nothing, and a room full of people cannot stand not knowing where somebody stands, so it pokes at the silence, gently, just to see what is actually underneath it. What happens in the next 10 seconds decides something that is genuinely hard to undo later. I want to talk about that moment today. Why it happens to almost everyone eventually, why most people fail it without ever realizing they failed, and what the Stoics figured out, a long time before psychology had a name for any of this, that turns that exact moment into the start of real authority instead of the start of being overlooked. Here is the thing most people get wrong about that moment. They think the joke was about them personally, like the room looked at them and decided something cruel on purpose. It almost never works that way. It's not really about you at all. It is the room trying to solve something it doesn't even know it is solving. Every group of people runs on a hierarchy nobody actually voted on, and that hierarchy gets built fast, usually in the first few minutes, long before anyone consciously decides anything about anyone else. Human beings have needed this skill for a very long time. Groups needed to know quickly who could be pushed around and who could not, because getting that wrong used to cost something real. Time, resources, sometimes more than that. That old instinct didn't go anywhere. It just traded the fire pit for the office, the group chat, the dinner table. So when a room runs into someone quiet, someone who has not shown where they stand yet, something old and mostly automatic kicks in. A small test gets run. Most of the time it's not even cruel on purpose. It's the same instinct that once decided who got fed first, just wearing a joke instead of a spear. And here's what almost nobody tells you. How you respond in the next few seconds is not really about that one joke. It becomes information. Information the whole room quietly stores and keeps coming back to for a long time after that. Marcus Aurelius wrote something people usually skim right past. He said to be like a cliff the waves keep crashing into. The cliff does not throw itself at the water. It does not fight anything. It just stays exactly what it already was, and the water, unable to move it, eventually falls still around it. That's the whole picture right there. The cliff is not resisting through force. It's not doing anything at all. It's just refusing to become something else because a wave happened to show up, which is exactly what the room is checking for underneath that first small joke. Not whether you can fight back, whether you can stay what you already were when something tries to move you. Almost everyone fails this test one of two ways. Both feel completely reasonable in the moment. Both quietly cost you something you do not get back easily. The first way is overreacting. The joke lands, and something in you needs to fix it right now. You snap back harder than the moment called for. You get visibly annoyed. You make sure everyone at the table knows this bothered you more than a small comment should. What that actually tells the room has nothing to do with strength. It tells them the opposite. It says a joke, something half the table will forget by next week, was enough to knock you off balance. Once a room learns that about someone, it remembers, not always on purpose, but the next time somebody wants a reaction out of you, they already know exactly where to press. The second way looks nothing like the first, but costs just as much. This is the failure of shrinking. The joke lands, and instead of pushing back, you fold inward. You go quieter than you already were. You laugh along a little too hard, trying to prove it didn't get to you. This tells the room something just as damaging. It says you can be pushed, and you will not push back at all. And a room that learns this treats that person differently from then on. usually without anyone being consciously unkind about it. People just start taking up more space around someone who defends less of it. Epictetus put this plainly a long time ago. He said it's not events that disturb people, it's their opinions about events. The joke itself does not have any weight of its own. It only becomes an injury the moment you decide it is one, and then either attack it or run from it. There's a third way to handle it. Almost nobody finds it naturally. Almost anybody can build it on purpose. The third response is neither attack nor retreat. The Stoics had a word for the state underneath it, apatheia, though the word gets mistranslated constantly. It does not mean not caring. It means not being controlled by a reaction you never actually chose. In practice, it looks almost boring from the outside. The joke lands, you feel whatever you feel for half a second, and then without any visible effort, you just do not let it move you. Maybe you smile a little, maybe you say something short and unbothered. Maybe you say nothing at all and keep doing what you were already doing. The actual words matter far less than whatever's happening underneath them. What that tells the room is something almost nobody can fake for very long. It says this did not cost me anything. Not because you are pretending it did not land, because it genuinely did not, since you never handed the moment enough power over you to begin with. Here's the part almost nobody explains. Rooms stop testing people who do not react the way the test expects. Not out of respect, at least not yet. Out of something closer to confusion. The room was expecting a reaction. It got nothing instead. And nothing in that specific moment does not compute the way the room wanted it to. An unmoved response to a small provocation does something strange to group dynamics. Without a single word of explanation, it suggests there is more underneath the surface than the room first assumed. And groups unsure what they are actually dealing with tend to give more space and more caution to whatever they cannot easily read. This is not a trick you perform. It only works because it is actually true. You cannot fake being unbothered convincingly for long. Sooner or later, the performance cracks, and the room notices the gap between what you showed and what was actually going on underneath it. Which means the real work is not learning how to look unbothered. The real work is becoming someone who genuinely is. If it were simple to just decide not to be bothered by something, nobody would struggle with this. So let us be honest about why it is actually hard. The sting you feel when someone tests you is not a flaw in your character. It is a nervous system doing exactly what it was built to do. Getting excluded or mocked lights up some of the same wiring in the brain as actual physical pain. Your body does not really tell the difference between a joke at your expense and a real threat to where you stand in the group. Which means staying calm is not the absence of feeling something. It is what happens after you feel it, in that small space between the sting and whatever you do next. Seneca wrote about that exact space. Between what happens to us and how we respond, there is a gap. And that gap, small as it is where all of a person's real power actually lives. Most people never notice it exists. They live like the sting and the reaction are the same thing, glued together, automatic. None of this was ever about getting rid of the sting. It was about noticing that gap and choosing, on purpose, what happens inside it. Over and over, until the choosing starts to feel automatic too. That takes repetition. Nobody gets an unshakable response from one good insight or one video. It gets built the way any skill gets built, doing it under real pressure, failing small, correcting slowly. Here is the strange comfort in that. Life never runs out of practice for this. Every room that tests you is another rep. Every small provocation you let pass through you without letting it run you. That is proof, mostly to yourself, that the gap is real, and you can stand inside it. Something specific happens once someone stops reacting the way a room expects them to. The testing does not stop right away. Sometimes it actually gets worse for a little while. Almost like the room is checking whether that first calm response was a fluke. This is where a lot of people lose ground they already earned, because they assume passing once means it is over. It rarely is. Not the first few times. But something builds with every repetition. The room quietly updates what it thinks it knows about this person. Not through any conversation. Through pattern. The same old instinct that once decided who ate first around the fire. Eventually, and this happens more often than people expect, the testing just stops. Not because the room decided to be kind, because it ran out of reasons to keep checking. The unknown became known, and what it found underneath turned out to be solid. What replaces the testing is something the Stoics would recognize. even if they never use this word for it. Deference, not fear, not submission, just a kind of unconscious caution that groups give to anything they cannot easily move. This is the actual mechanism behind what looks, from a distance, like natural authority. It rarely comes from volume or a title on a business card. It comes from a track record, built one interaction at a time, of not being moved by the small things that move almost everyone else. Marcus Aurelius held the most powerful position in the ancient world, and yet the people who actually spent time around him kept describing the same thing. He was almost impossible to provoke into a reaction he had not already chosen for himself. That was not luck. That was not just his personality. That was years of the exact practice we have been talking about, practiced under stakes most rooms will never come close to asking of you. Here is what I want you to actually walk away with. Next time you sit down somewhere new and somebody tests you, a small joke, a dismissive comment, something that lands somewhere between playful and pointed, remember what that moment really is. It is not really about you. It is the room running an old, mostly unconscious calculation it cannot help but run. And how you handle the gap between the sting and whatever comes next becomes information the room quietly keeps, whether you meant it to or not. You do not need to attack. You do not need to shrink either. You just need to stay, as completely as you can manage, whatever you already were before the test showed up. That is not something you perform for the room. It's something you build in private, in the quiet hours nobody sees, long before you ever need it in public. The cliff does not decide right when the wave hits to suddenly become solid. It was already solid. The wave just shows what was true the whole time. Let the room test you. It always will in one form or another. For as long as you keep walking into rooms, just make sure there is already something solid there,